On. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the GD Report. I'm G,
And I'm D.
and we got another packed show for you today. We're going to be heading down south to the great state of Georgia, which during the election we kind of focused on it as being the linchpin of the election, and it has a couple of years long history of some shenanigans going on for suppressing the vote. So we're going to talk about where that stands and what's going on with that, and then we're going to do a little post-mortem about the election and how the Democrats fared. So why don't you kick it off, D, and tell us what you know about what's going on down in Georgia.
Yeah, they're Republicans are in an interesting what's called between a rock and a hard place in Georgia right now with what's happening. Obviously, the hand recount has ended, and it has certified the election that Joe Biden flipped the state of Georgia and won the state. This is under a Republican governor, Brian Kemp, who I know, G-Man's your favorite governor in the U.S.
Yeah.
And a Republican Secretary of State named, I forget his first name, but Raffensperger is his last name, I believe.
Yeah.
And so they've certified the election as a win for Biden. Donald Trump continues to harp and moan and cry and whine that Georgia was rigged. Georgia was, there was invalid ballots cast. It's a fraud. All these false accusations he keeps making with no proof at all. The Secretary of State has said repeatedly, this is one of the cleanest and fairest elections that he's seen. And he attributed Trump's loss to the fact that Trump himself had suppressed mail-in ballots for Republicans. And because he had suppressed it by discouraged his voters from doing it. And
right. How did he do that exactly?
Well, he told them that the best thing to do was to vote in person. And he kind of had that mixed message all over the country. So we've talked about before. In Wisconsin, at one rally, he announced when early voting took place. But in Georgia, he told people they should vote in person, and that unless people have a medical reason, they should be voting in person, and on and on and on. So you've got this paradigm going right now where a large percentage of Trump voters feel like that the election was a fraud because he continues to stoke those flames. Well, on the down ballot races for U.S. Senate, you had the multiple candidate primary with Kelly Loeffler, where she came in second to Raphael Warnock, the Reverend who is the pastor at Emmanuel Baptist Church in Atlanta. And then you had the incumbent Senator David Perdue, who was up for re-election, who did not reach the 50 percentile threshold, 50% plus one, against John Ossoff, and they are now in a runoff. So you've got two runoffs, which we predicted on our podcast, by the way, that it could all come down to Georgia for the Senate. And the current balance of the Senate is 50 seats for Republicans, 48 for Democrats. Right. So if the Democrats are to win these two seats, we will have a 50-50 tie in the Senate. And then the tiebreaker vote will go to the president of the Senate, who is the vice president of the United States, which is Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris will cast the deciding vote. Therefore, the majority goes to the Democrats. So all the committee chairmanships, the committees where there's 12 members and it's 8 majority party and 4 minority parties, all those committee balances will be shifted at that point. So really everything hangs in the balance with the Democratic House of Representatives on these two seats. But the problem Republicans are having, and the chairperson of the Republican National Committee found that out the hard way this weekend when she was at a rally in Georgia, and she was questioned by voters. Why should Republican voters, why should we vote in this runoff election when we know it's already rigged against us?
Right. So they're, as you said, they're between a rock and a hard place because Trump said it's all rigged, and then turns out he lost the state. So if you're what does Rush call him, a low information voter, and you believe what the president tells you, then there's really no incentive for you to go vote in the Senate race because the Democrats are going to win it anyway.
That's right. It's already rigged. And so Ronna Romney McDaniel, the RNC chair, said, no, 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 no. You're getting it wrong to the voter. And I'm paraphrasing here, but she said, you're getting it wrong. We do want every vote to be counted in the presidential election, and we don't think those are counted right, but it's going to be a fair election in the runoff.
Right, by the same people that conducted the first election that wasn't fair.
Right, and Trump, meanwhile, is stoking the flame, saying he's regretting endorsing Brian Kemp. He never should have endorsed him. Raffensperger is blaming Trump, as I mentioned. He's now receiving death threats, unfortunately, to him and his family for doing his job.
Right.
And so you've got this whole thing. Now, Senate Republicans are staying quiet, by the way, and a big reason why many of them are not openly saying congratulations to President-elect Biden is because they don't want to anger Trump because they feel like they need his support. But I got to ask you this question. With your political instincts, G-Man, next Saturday, the 5th, I believe, Trump is scheduled to go to Georgia and hold a rally.
Right.
Do you think that rally is going to do Perdue and Loeffler any good? Or is he going to get up there on stage and he's going to rant and rave about how the election was rigged and he was robbed and it's all about him? I mean, I see Martha McSally all over again, where he told her to come up here. You got about a minute. Be quick. Nobody wants to hear it anyway. Remember when he did that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think
I mean,
they're dancing with fire.
They really are. Loeffler and Perdue are they're kind of in a tough spot because, as we said on a previous podcast, I don't think the Republicans can win those seats unless Trump goes down to campaign. And at that point, I said I didn't see why he would. Now he's announced that he will, and like you said, I believe he'll just get up on stage and rant and rave about how unfairly he was treated, and I think he'll drop some hints to 2024, which there's already been a story out that he might actually announce his 2024 candidacy on Inauguration Day. So we'll have to see how that goes. So
yeah, it's going to be a big challenge for Perdue and Loeffler. I saw Perdue was at a rally, I believe it was on Tuesday or Wednesday, and somebody yelled out, "What are you doing to help President Trump overturn the election results?"
Right.
And
yeah,
he was like, well, I'll get to that. He was like, I'll get to that. I want to talk about our race first. I'm going to come back to that. And the guy was like, no, I want to know now. What are you doing to help President Trump overturn that? He didn't have a solid answer. He wasn't ready for it.
Yeah, because there's really nothing they can do,
Yeah, and if they come across that they're accepting of the results, and that's going to piss off the Trump voter.
Right.
And then if they come off and say, yeah, the results are bad, that could make the Trump voter, like you said, disinterested in voting.
Right.
So, yeah, and the other thing is they were criticized because they've been saying we're the last bastion of hope of stopping Joe Biden, and when they say that, they're admitting that Biden won.
Right.
Which is going to infuriate Donnie Smalltable and make him more upset about everything. So it's definitely going to be a challenge.
Well, so that's a good segue into our next topic about how did the Democrats actually do in the 2020 election. So you and I have talked about this off camera, and we have slightly differing views.
Why don't you kick us off with your thoughts?
Well, my thought, and the word I used, which you chastised me for, and after listening to your argument, I think rightfully so, was disaster. So, and the reason I thought it was a disaster is we went into this election thinking there was going to be this enormous blue wave that was going to sweep the country. Democrats, in fact, I think I said I thought Democrats could pick up as many as 11 seats in the Senate. And they would hold their majority in the House, which they did hold the majority, but they lost 13 seats. believe that's the correct number now. One seat.
There's still a few. There's still a few out there, but they lost. They
Yeah.
lost.
And then they ended up with a net gain of one with Mark Kelly and John Hickenlooper with those wins in Arizona and Colorado. And they lost the Doug Jones seat in Alabama, which everybody predicted, even though Tommy Tuberville is about as smart as a wooden fence post.
That's insulting to wooden fence posts.
Yeah, absolutely. But I really thought it was a disaster for the Democrats because they went into the election with all these high hopes, and then they barely squeaked by, so to speak. And then, but you have a different take.
Well, I definitely think it's a disappointment. I would use another D word as opposed to a disaster.
Right.
But I think if you can net gain Senate seats, I think that's still a positive. The fact that I personally believe, we just talked about Georgia, I personally believe this is a twofer. I think one party is going to win both seats.
Right.
I don't think anybody's going to go in and say, I'm going to vote for John Ossoff, but I'm going to vote for Kelly Loeffler. I don't see people doing that, splitting the votes. I think they're going to, it'll be a twofer either way. I think there's a strong chance they pick up both of those seats. And the polling shows it's very evenly divided right now, but the Democrats have a slight edge. I think it's going to come down to turnout. I don't think Trump's going to help in that. And then if that happens, then while it's not the 11 seats that you talked about, I was probably close to you, but I was probably in the 6 to 8 seat gain range that I thought, which obviously there was some state polling that was off there. But when you start looking at that, you go, they won the presidency, they won control of the Senate, and they maintained their control of the House. That's far to me from a disaster. Now there's some areas where I agree with you. Some big disappointments in the Senate. I think the fact that Susan Collins was reelected, huge disappointment. The fact that the people of South Carolina and Lindsey Graham they're sending him back again. That's a big disappointment. But not totally.
Cal Cunningham in North Carolina.
Cal Cunningham, he got himself in some trouble. I'm trying to keep that one clean. Right. But he got himself in some trouble there that we've well documented. So I don't think it's a disaster. I think there were some states in Texas, there were some House seats that they really underperformed in that they thought they were going to be. I mean, Texas again is, I've said it many times, but it's Lucy pulling the football away from Charlie Brown.
Yeah.
Where Charlie's going to go kick it. This time he's really going to kick it. So I don't think it was a disaster. I think there were some state legislatures that those will be the ones that are the most painful that they did not win. Because if the states continue with gerrymandering and some of those things where the House districts get drawn up in a crazy fashion, that'll be a challenge for them to overcome. But I do want to talk about, because you're right in the fact that they definitely, whether we call it a disaster or we call it a disappointment, Democrats once again underperformed in a year that they should have performed better or they should have known better. And I think it comes down to a couple different issues for me. Number one, it's messaging. And we've talked about this on some previous podcasts, but Democrats never seem to close the loop in a strong and commanding message that resonates with voters. They'll say things, and they let Republicans a lot of times set the terms of the battle. You take something like defund the police.
Right.
And when that phrase came out, most people agreed that other than a few folks really on the fringe, they weren't really talking about total defunding the police. They were talking about taking money away from certain aspects of police, maybe things like buying military style equipment and tear gas and those kinds of things, and reforming that money or rediverting that money towards training, towards involving psychologists, all those kinds of things. So really a big messaging gap there on that one. But Democrats, they want to assume sometimes that the voter has enough intelligence to connect the dots. And in our society today, with as busy as people are, buzzwords sell. There's a reason that commercials are very quick and to the point. And even now, look at how we used to, when you and I were back in broadcast TV in our early days, it was a 30 or a 15-second commercial. Now it's 5 seconds online.
Yep.
It's a compressed message. It's really quick, and it's bullet points. And Republicans are great at saying Democrats are for defund the police. Democrats are for locking down the economy. Democrats are for all these things. And Democrats just assume that people are going to take that full-fledged argument where they say, oh, we're not really for locking down the economy. I've got a 12-point plan, and the 12-point plan is this, this, and this, and it's going to make everybody safe, instead of just cutting to the chase and saying, I'm not for locking down the economy. I'm for putting $1,200 a month in your pocket to help you with your expenses while we scale back things to get this virus under control. My opponent's not for the $1,200.
Right.
They're voting for you to get zero.
Right. Like cutting out the wall spending and cutting out, the F-35, which costs $1 billion a plane.
Yeah. I mean, you think about that, the wall, that's a great example. 3 words, right? It was 3 words, build the wall, build the wall.
Right.
And that's what Trump supporters heard. They didn't hear anything about the wall won't work. The wall won't work.
Right.
They're not, Mexico's not paid for the wall.
Right.
They've taken money, like you said, out of the military budget to try to pay for a small stretch of like 30 miles barrier. It's not even a full wall.
Well, I remember in 2014 when Cory Gardner was running for the Senate. He was up against a pretty strong Democratic incumbent. And every YouTube video I watched during that election cycle started with a black screen and a single person on camera. And it had a picture of, I can't even remember the Democratic's name now.
Udall.
Yeah. Mark Udall. It had a picture of Mark Udall, and this guy on the left and the announcer on the right. And he said, and this is like maybe 10 seconds. He said, did you know that Mark Udall has voted with President Obama 99.9% of the time? Let's fire him. Here's your video. Now, I don't know how long it takes to say that, but certainly not more than 10 seconds. And that was before every YouTube video that ran. And I'm guessing they bought that for the whole state of Colorado. And it was very effective. It propelled Cory Gardner to the Senate.
Yeah. And so it comes down to messaging. And so I think that's the big thing that the Democrats really failed on, was their messaging. And then the other big thing is that funding of a campaign doesn't translate into a win.
Right. We saw that with Jamie Harrison out in South Carolina, who raised
Jamie Harrison, Sarah Gideon, Cal Cunningham. We joke about him, but he had a lot of money too.
Right.
And I've heard a lot of discussion in some of the groups I'm in about, do we need to think about, instead of funding candidates, funding things like Fair Fight, which is Stacey Abrams' organization that works for fair election practices, that works for get out the vote efforts, that doesn't pay a bunch of big bloated campaign staff to set it around and tell a candidate what they want to hear, that actually focuses on getting people to the polls.
Right. Well, I think it's a double-edged sword, though, because you can get people out to the polls, but if you don't have a decent candidate, then your people going to the polls are going to scratch their head and go, do I really want to vote for this guy?
Yeah, right? But I think part of that discussion is what did that last round, what was it? Jamie Harrison raised like $57 million.
Yeah, I know he raised $3 million in about 45 minutes after their debate,
which is fantastic. But I don't think there was $56 million worth of media left to buy in the state of South Carolina.
Right. So you got to wonder, with all that money, how do you end up losing by 13 points?
Well, and there's obviously racial bias. There's a lot of things at play in a race like that. It's a conservative state, but you got to say, did we spend the money in the right way? I think Democrats have to really look at that. Now, there was a lot of debate amongst candidates about in-person. A lot of Democrats did not do in-person canvassing. They didn't go door to door. They didn't do those kinds of things. And Republicans did that in a lot of districts. So I think Democrats have a lot of challenges. But all in all, I think if they run on their message and they do a better job explaining, I think they can win. I think they can even win in a midterm in 2022, even though traditionally that's the time that a sitting president's party loses. But I think the norms have been shifted.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the 2022 midterms. I know the Republicans have another. The numbers aren't favorable for them in the Senate. I think they have 22 seats up for grabs,
Yeah,
or that
and I
they
think
have to defend.
we've seen in the last few the last few congressional elections that it used to be that Republicans really outperformed Democrats in the off-year elections,
Right.
the off-presidential elections.
Yep.
But I think it's almost flipped now, and I think it's because of the personality of Donald Trump. People show up to vote for him, but when he's not on the ballot, they don't show up as strongly.
Right. Yeah. So one of my Facebook friends asked me offline, basically, do you really believe that 80 million people in America voted for Joe Biden? And I said, no, but I believe 80 million, enthusiastically voted against Donald Trump.
Right.
So, so the Democrats have to ask themselves in 2022, what do you do? Because Donald Trump won't be on the ballot. However this presidential race turns out, but he, he'll still have a mouthpiece out there. He'll still be tweeting and, going on Fox and Friends. And
Can you tweet when you're in prison?
yeah, I think he can. I mean, you have internet access, so possibly. But
yeah, no, I think you're right. I think what the Democrats really need to do is develop a message that can play in multiple districts. And there's ways for it to happen. They just got to get a more refined message that in more moderate districts can play, and in more liberal districts it can play too.
Right.
The bottom line is who's going to be better for the economy, who's going to be better for healthcare, who's going to be better for the environment. And everybody cares about the environment, even if they think they don't. They do.
Right.
They care about it. And you've got to translate the environment, like you talk about a lot, and you do a great job when you talk about it. The environment's not just this big, oh, we're going to come and make you not drive a car anymore. That's the Republican scare tactic. The environment is having clean water to drink in your house,
Right.
having water that your kids can take a bath in and not worry that their skin gets acid on it, and
Right.
having clean air to breathe, having public places and parks and national parks that are preserved for all time for people to be able to go and enjoy in the outdoors.
That don't have oil derricks every 25 feet.
It's for having an energy policy where if the Middle East gets mad at us, we don't start paying $5 a gallon for gas.
Right.
It's having an energy policy that our great grandchildren can look back on and be proud of and know, wow, they actually made an investment so that we could have a world to live in. So it's, it all comes down to messaging and having that right message. And I think the Democrats, they're challenged because it's the last party of the two that is actually a big tent party.
Right.
Because you actually do have conservative, moderate, and liberal Democrats all in one party. And pretty much now in the Republican Party, you have Trumpists.
Right.
It's pretty much all you have: Trumpist and Mitt Romney and Susan Collins.
Right. Yeah. So Mitt Romney seems to have somewhat of a backbone, which is interesting because the woman you were talking about, Miss McDaniel, correct? Isn't
Right.
she somehow related to Mitt Romney?
It's his niece.
Oh, it's his niece.
Yeah.
Right.
She is notably, when she ran for that seat, she went by her maiden name of Ronna Romney McDaniel, and now she has dropped the Romney from any communication.
Right. Probably at Trump's behest, since Mitt has pillaged him so badly. But it's interesting, and I think refreshing to see a senator stand up for what the Senate is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be a rubber stamp of the presidency. Then you only have two branches of government. The House and the presidency. Well, and the Supreme Court. But you know what I'm saying. The
Right.
Senate has abdicated its responsibility to advise and consent, and they've replaced it with just rubber stamp. So
yeah, or rubber stamp or do nothing.
Right.
So hopefully they can get, I'm hopeful that the Democrats win those 2 seats in Georgia. They've got a majority, and then you've got a chance for 2 years for Joe Biden to govern, to be able to get some things passed, and then the American people can make their judgment in 2 years if they want to continue the legislative side that way. And then in 2 years after that, they can determine if they want Joe Biden to be reelected. That's how things are supposed to work.
Right.
It's not supposed to just be, let's run the four corners offense, run out the clock, not let the other party have anything they want. There's supposed to be compromise. I would love to see the Senate return to regular order, where bills get hearings and they get floor votes, and everything's not filibustered. Everything's not just, you got cloture votes on everything. I would love to see something actually get done in the Senate.
Right. Well, if things work out like you think they will, and they do get control of the Senate, with the 51st vote being cast by the vice president, Kamala Harris, they really need to go in there with a mindset that they've got 60 votes, and they need to do what the Republicans have done and just push through their agenda as best and as fast as they can, and get the things done in the first 2 years like they want to do, because there's no guarantee, as we saw with Barack Obama, there's no guarantee they're going to get the last 2 years of the Biden administration.
Yeah, you're dead on. And I mean, you look at in Obama's first term, Ted Kennedy passed away, and then Scott Brown was appointed to that seat and won that special election, and that was the deciding vote that pretty much put Obamacare at risk of even getting passed. They were able to get it through budget reconciliation, but they weren't able to get it through in regular order. And so at a 50-50 tie, I mean, you got to be checking everybody's health. And let's face it, there's a lot of older members.
Right. Well, and I still maintain, I know that you and I differ on this, but I still maintain that you could go to Lisa Murkowski and even Susan Collins, and you could say, look, Susan, you won this race, but the demographics in your state are shifting. You're probably not going to win your next one. Why don't you go ahead now and come over to our side, and we'll give you whatever committee chairmanship you want. And that increases your lead to 51, and then go to Lisa Murkowski and say, look, you're an independent. Alaska is starting to trend blue. You've got just as much a chance to win as a Democrat as you do as an independent or a Republican. Why don't you join our side, and we'll give you whatever chairmanship you want. And that gives you a 52, and with the tiebreaker 53 vote majority. And then you don't have to worry about if there's a conservative Democrat in West Virginia that needs to vote against whatever you're trying to push.
Yeah, I think that would be a best case scenario, but I don't see Susan Collins switching because it was such a bitter debate or bitter election.
Right.
She's already had some choice words for Chuck Schumer for campaigning. I mean, she's under the illusion that it's the Senate's like it used to be back in the 70s or 80s when they didn't campaign. Even the opposing party didn't campaign against the sitting senator.
Right.
And it's like, come on. So she said that there, millions of dollars are spent on lies about me. So I don't see her switching, but I don't see what kind of home does she have in a Republican Party that's so dominated by Trump?
Yeah, none.
So I think you could win her on some issues. I doubt if she switches parties. Lisa Murkowski, I still don't see her switching, man, because she may still. Trump said he's going to see her in 2 years. So
that's strong incentive.
So that's an incentive, unless she just thinks she can't, that she would piss off Republicans too much, because Dan Sullivan won by a pretty good margin against Al Gross.
Right.
So we shall see. But Democrats definitely have some work to do. But again, I think it's not the end of the world. I think it's a matter of messaging. I think it's some things that can be fixed. I think, and we can do another podcast another time about this, but I think the future of the Republican Party is actually a lot darker.
Right.
And I mean that in figuratively and literally, from a standpoint that it's dark days ahead for that party. Anytime one personality controls your party, I think you've got struggles with that.
Right. Well, but they did. another reason I thought this might have been somewhat of a disaster for the Democrats is it appears, and I haven't crunched the numbers. I did hear a couple of different shows on this, but it appears that Trump did very well with the Hispanics, and he did better than he did in 2016 with the blacks. So, if you've got, blacks and Hispanics starting to join the Republican Party, they no longer have that mantra of you're just for old white people.
Well, it was the only thing he did better with Latinos than he did in 2016, which was still not great. So it's not like he's not getting close to George W. Bush numbers,
Right.
With Latinos. As far as African Americans go, there was only one small demographic that Trump did better in, and it was African American males, and he did a slight uptick there, but it wasn't anything substantial. So
Right.
I don't think either one of those are the future of the party. I do think that Democrats have to do a better job recognizing that there's some real distinction in the Latinx community between Cubans, Venezuelans, and those from Mexico, those from Honduras, different immigrants that come from different places. Just because they speak Spanish, they're not the same.
Right.
They don't have the same issues that matter to them, and they don't need to be treated so monolithic. So, but we'll also talk about on a future episode about some of the things that happened in South Florida, because there's some really interesting things happen down there with candidates being added to ballots and nobody really knowing who those candidates are, but they just happen to have the same last name as the Democratic candidates.
Right.
All right. Well, hey, this takes us to the end of another edition of the GD Report. Again, if you're going out, be sure and mask up, be safe, take care of yourselves. We just came through Thanksgiving. There's been a lot of people traveling. Everybody take extra precautions. If your area is under a lockdown and you don't have to be out, and I understand there are economic reasons where people have to be out, and I recognize that. But if at all you can stay home and just be safe, take care of yourselves. That's the bottom line.
Yep. We'll see you next time, everybody.
Take care.
Good night.